So, nonsense. Let's talk about that.
Day one of being a girl, and I have already cried 3 times.
Well,
Can you tell me what a woman is?
no, I can't.
I think I can see your beard.
She won the 500 freestyle.
Thomas!
So Nash, just like me, is non-binary.
Oh. And but
A week or two ago I was watching a sermon by Mark Driscoll. Many of you will know who he is, he's got a bit of a past, there have been issues there, I understand that, but in the course of it he said this.
Jezebel is a transgender spirit that castrates men.
The spirit of Jezebel? I think that's interesting actually. Let's have a look at it. There's no doubt that the rise of LGBT ideology has been absolutely rapid to the point that it cannot simply be natural. If we look at the different generations, the baby boomers who were born just after World War II and the Gen Xers who were born from 1960 until about 1980, in those generations about 1 to 2% identified as LGBT. In my generation, millennials who were born from 1980 until the mid-90s, it's about 10%. And in Gen Z, as the Americans call it, it should be called Gen Z, but Americans, you don't speak English properly. The Northern Irish speak English properly.
Oh God, you wouldn't get along getting the ankles frostbucked off you.
In that generation who were born in the late 90s, it's about 20% who are identifying as LGBT. Here's the thing, a lot of people talk about being born this way, but it's quite simply not possible for 20% of a population that has risen in this exponential curve to be born with inclinations that do not produce children. If that was the case, we would simply not have a society. The only way this is possible is through ideological manipulation and seduction. Now I think many Christians agree, but what does this modern woke left-wing ideology have to do with an ancient queen called Jezebel? Is that a stretch, or is it right?
That is absolutely correct.
We're told in 1 Kings 16 that Jezebel was the daughter of the king called Ethbaal, and what Jezebel did together with her husband was introduce into the life of Israel the worship of Baal. Or Baal, whatever you want to call it. And so they take the people of God and they turn them into pagans.
Blood for Baal!
And we know biblically that the worship of idols, the worship of pagan gods, is the worship of demons. And to understand the link between Jezebel and our current ideology, we need to understand what demon worship really is and how demons came about. The demons came about because Satan, who was an angel with God in heaven, and his allies wanted to take the place of God. They wanted to be like God. And it's interesting that Satan, when he's in the garden and he's tempting Eve, he is tempting her with the same thing, that she can be like God.
I'm sensing a pattern here.
And so what we see at the very center of Satan's plan is this idea that we and he can become like God. He wants to erase the distinction between God and us. He wants to erase this binary thing between creator and creation. That is at the very center of his purposes. And of course we see that the biblical truth is the very opposite. Right in Genesis 1, what do we see? There is a creator and a creation. There is light, there is dark, there is sun, there is moon, there is land, there is sea, there is animal, there is human, there is male, and there is female. And all of this demonstrates the binary and the true binary, which is the difference between the creator and the creation, between God and us. And at the very center of pagan worship, which is demon worship, is the removal of the binary.
Good binary.
The religious philosopher Peter Jones writes about this, and he says that all of these pagan ideologies, they are all about oneness, that everything is one, that we are gods, that creation is God, that everything we touch is divine, that evil and good are actually one thing, they are two sides of the same coin.
We are all one spirit.
And interestingly, when you look at pagan practices throughout history, no matter where they originated or what their tradition behind them was, we see that they had a few different rituals in common. One of the key rituals was that men dressed up as women and performed essentially drag shows for all ages. This was an important pagan ritual. And furthermore, what we see as the ultimate sacrament in pagan ideology is the coming together of people in temple prostitution and particularly in same-sex activity. And this has always been a key part of pagan worship, erasing the male-female distinction because we ultimately want to erase the creator-creation distinction. And if there is something demonic behind today's wokeness, that is at least suspicious, right?
Very suspicious.
Now in our day, we don't seem to name the pagan gods, but we do seem to do their acts of worship. We have all the fruits of paganism, just without the title of Baal behind it. And so we have Drag Queen Story Hour, and what we're told is that this is men dressing up as women and sharing stories with children. But I'm married, right? I know at least one woman. In fact, I don't mean to brag, I know several women.
Show off.
They do not dress like this. This is not how women actually dress. This is a caricature, a provocative, sexualized, and I would say demonic caricature of how women look. And it doesn't stop there. It has moved on from drag queen story hour and now involves performing provocative erotic dances for toddlers. That's exactly what was happening in pagan worship thousands of years ago. We've seen the erasure of distinction. Hershey's just used a biological male as their spokesperson for International Women's Month. The Biden administration just gave an International Woman of Courage award to another biological male. Here in the UK and the Isle of Man, they brought in a drag queen to teach children about and sexuality, including for some reason, to a bunch of 11-year-olds, and they kicked the child out of the class for saying there were only 2 genders because the drag queen posited that there were in fact 73.
That doesn't sound right.
And this is nonsense, and we all know this is nonsense. The distinction between male and female is actually one of the most intuitive things that we know. Children in the womb know the difference between mother and father. They know the difference between the sound of a female voice and a male voice. They relate differently to their 2 parents intuitively from before birth. And is this related to pagan worship? Is this in any way demonic? I think it's interesting that the big annual month in which we all have to celebrate this stuff is named after the original sin of Satan and the original sin of man in the garden, where they tried to take the place of God and erase the creator-creation distinction, namely
Pride March. Celebrating Pride Month.
But I'm sure it's just a coincidence, okay? There's nothing to see here.
I was being sarcastic.
Now, why do we care about this stuff? Why am I talking about this? Here's why. It's destructive. Young people have always experienced what they call social contagion, where you have these self-destructive habits that spread among teenagers. And a couple of decades ago, it was things like self-harm and anorexia. Those things still exist, but they're not as prevalent. But there was a while where it was a real problem. It was like a disease. It was a social contagion going through teenagers. You might think the whole LGBT stuff, it's just like that. But here's where it's different. In the case of this stuff, the adults are pushing it.
Hi kids! There's no such thing as a boy or a girl.
And I also use they and them, because calling me a she or a he doesn't feel right to me.
I think it was a huge testament to how much we've been talking about it in the classroom that you never mentioned the term non-binary. It was a child who brought that up because it's constantly in conversation.
Imagine a girl struggling with anorexia, desperately thin. And she goes to the doctors and they say, well, we need to put you on anorexia affirming care. It doesn't matter what your body says, that you're underweight, that this is not healthy, that this will lead you to an early grave. What your mind says is all that matters. So we need to put you on liposuction and a diet plan immediately. Now that sounds ridiculous, but it is exactly what is happening in the trans movement. And this is the thing that the President of America recently said, not doing that to kids, not giving them that kind of quote-unquote care is almost a sin. And it's arguably worse than that example, because it's completely irreversible. We're talking about surgically removing healthy organs. We're talking about giving the same drugs that they give to chemically castrate criminals to teenagers and calling it a puberty blocker.
One of the drugs used is Lupron, right, which has actually been used to chemically castrate sex offenders.
You know what? I'm not sure that we should continue with this interview.
And they manipulate and they lie to the parents and say,
would you rather have a living son or a dead daughter?
And it's not true. It does not help with suicide rates at all. All it does is destroy their bodies irreversibly.
That's a phalloplasty. That's a bottom surgery. We have 5 children's hospitals in the United States telling girls that they can be boys.
And Jesus is very clear about what he would say to people like that. He says that anyone who would cause one of these little ones, one of these unprotected children to stumble in sin, it would be better for them to have a millstone hung around their neck and be chucked into the sea. This movement preys on the vulnerable. 82% of people have contemplated suicide. 40% have tried it. That's almost 8 times the national average. And it is these people whom this movement is preying upon. And what they need to be told is not that your body is wrong, but that your body is holy. Your body is sacred. Your body was designed by God for a purpose. It was intended to be a temple of the Holy Spirit. He knitted it together in your mother's womb. He formed it. He knows it. He knows every hair on your head. You have been fearfully and wonderfully made. And the difficulties that you're having can be solved, not by changing your appearance, but by being born again, by knowing the love of Jesus. Jesus died for you. Jesus' body was mutilated so that yours would not have to be. Did you like that video? Me neither, that was awful, but it doesn't make it any less true or any less important. If you'd like to support the channel, obviously videos like this are not going to get monetized. I mean, technically none of my videos get monetized because you need 1,000 subscribers. Getting pretty close, okay? Just about 900 and something to go. But you can help me with both of those. You can support on Patreon. You can get some stuff from We Are Contra Mundum. Fantastic Christian apparel. You should check it out. If you would like to see more on this issue, I've done another one on why men don't like church and talking about the problem of a lack of masculinity in today's church. So you can check out that video next. And of course, subscribe to the channel. That always helps. Thank you very much.